And welcome to episode number 065 of Something Else with Ari and Not KJ. My name is Ari Whitner, and I am a Buffalo Bills fan. I've been a Bills fan for 32 years. Hi, Aria. Yes, this fucking team is killing me. It's hilarious because then I know you're not listening for me talking about football. If you're long-time listeners in this show, will recall that we did an NFL preview edition last year, and it went about 30 seconds. So yeah, but this fucking team, I swear, gives me it gave me less heartache when we sucked for 20 years than it does now. It's like, because at least then, I may have said, oh, we're going to win the Super Bowl every year, but I had realistic expectations. But for fuck's sake, but oh well, that's when I start a football podcast, and specifically a Buffalo Bills football podcast. But we're talking wrestling, professional wrestling as it is. Professional wrestling, something that really hurts when you try to do it. Anywho, this is episode number 065 of Something Else with Aria, not KJ. My name is Aria, and today we're discussing Mid-South Wrestling from November 25th, 1982. We're going to have some weird news of the week later on, and, wrap things up, because I also got to do the Smoky Mountain Re-Watch-Along Project that's also being dropped along with this episode tomorrow as I'm recording this. Actually, 11 hours from now is when I send it to our illustrious website leader who will post it. So I should probably get 2 1-hour podcasts out of the way. So anywho, let's dive into it. It's Mid-South Wrestling, November 25th, 1982, from the Irish McNeil Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana. We're going to start, we're going to play the intro with Boyd Pierce and this week's guest host, the old cowboy, Bill Watts.
Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome to this edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television Network. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, and we have a lot of exciting action. North American Heavyweight Champion Ted DiBiase versus Tiger Conway Jr. All the top stars are here. Mr. Olympia, Mr. Wrestling 2, Iron Mike Sharp, Bob Roop returns, Kamala, the Ugandan Giant. The Japanese all-star team is here, and you'll see the action coming up right now. Our guest commentator of the week, a man who needs no introduction here on Mid-South Wrestling and all over the wrestling world, Cowboy Bill Watts. Bill?
Well, thank you, Boyd. It's great to be back. And, I was just reflecting as I was reading Sports Illustrated the other day that Dave Remington, who has just been announced the University of Nebraska center, who has won 2 Outland trophies back-to-back as the outstanding lineman in collegiate football and is considered the #1 draft choice in the pros, and they were talking about what a big, powerful man he is. 292 pounds. He bench presses 485 pounds, and Steve Dr. Death Williams and the other University of Oklahoma football players know what a powerful man this is. And yet, by comparison, here's a guy that's considered the king of the hill in football and the most outstanding prospect for pro football. Bench presses 485. Let's go back shortly here and relive a man 240 pounds. One Mr. USA, Tony Atlas, as he bench presses 3 repetitions with 500 pounds and then does 550 pounds strict. And as you know, the Junkyard Dog can do 560 pounds. So just draw a comparison next time you see one of these big, tough pro football players and just think what league they are in when it's come comparison time to a man like JYD or Mr. USA, Tony Atlas. Let's watch Tony Atlas do 500 pounds. 550. We're here.
All right. So this week, Ted DiBiase, the North American Heavyweight Champion, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, versus Tiger Conway Jr. and quote-unquote all the top stars will be here this week. And then Boyd Pierce gives us, the man who needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway, the Oklahoma Stampeder, Cowboy Bill Watts. And Bill, because it's Bill, and he just 44 minutes of talking about wrestling is just too much for him. Bill segues into talking about whatever the hell is on his mind. And this week, he just happened to read Sports Illustrated. He happened to read about football player Dave Remington bench pressing 485 pounds. And that led to them re-airing the entire skit that they aired a few weeks ago with Tony Atlas bench pressing 550 pounds. And if you recall, the only reason why they really aired that skit, it was to show Junkyard Dog and Stagger Lee together on screen. And this was when they had King Cobra, of course, under the Stagger Lee mask. And they literally re-aired the entire 5-minute skit. So everyone who complains about replays of random shit that goes on Raw and SmackDown and Dy-no-mite every week, just remember they tend to not replay the entire segments. They'll show you the highlights. And, I don't know what Tony Atlas can and cannot bench press. I don't know if he can actually, bench press 550 pounds or if he could at the time or whatever. But, leave it to Bill Watts. It's like, oh, hey, we have video of someone bench pressing 550. So this guy in Sports Illustrated bench pressing 485. That's not as good. But, at 485 pounds is a lot of fucking weight to bench press. By the way, Dave Remington would go on to be the 25th pick in the NFL draft, selected by the Bengals, and would play for 7 seasons for the Bengals and the Eagles. His collegiate career was such that the NCAA award for the best offensive center is named after him. And after retiring, he has worked for the Boomer Esiason Foundation, which fights cystic fibrosis. So all in all, I'll say it's a pretty good fucking legacy right there. And Tony Atlas has a foot fetish, and once confused me for somebody he wrestled. I don't know if I've told that story, and if I have, fast forward, 90 seconds. If not, enjoy. But at one of the WrestleMania, the WrestleCon conventions, I think it was Miami. For whatever reason, anytime I think of the story, it was Miami. So WrestleMania 28, 2012. I'm meandering around, minding everybody's business, when Tony Atlas, appears and starts talking about how much he enjoyed wrestling me. And I looked to my left, I looked to my right, and I looked to see who the hell he's actually talking to. And I realized he's talking to me. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Atlas, you're confusing me with somebody else. I've never wrestled. And he's like, oh, just because you never wrestled for Vince doesn't mean you're not a wrestler. And I'm like, oh, no, sir, that's not what I'm saying. And he's like, no, you just keep it up. I'm sure you'll do great. And just went on. And eventually I just thanked him and moved on with my life because, if I had a wrestling career, y'all would have heard about it by now. At this point, my claim to fame in pro wrestling is, I'm a Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame voter. And sometimes I wonder how the hell I pull that off. But anywho, so that's my Tony Atlas story. And so let's go back to the desk. So they just aired the entire 5-minute skid with Tony Atlas bench pressing 550 pounds. We'll go back to the desk here with Bill Watts.
Bill, I'm going to have to ask you to excuse yourself for just a few minutes. We have asked the North American Heavyweight Champion, Ted DiBiase, to commentate the championship bout coming up.
Well, Boyd, I'm sure that he would have a different view of his match than I would anyway. But reflecting back to Mr. USA, Tony Atlas, the people that watch Mid-South Wrestling and come to the arena see the greatest professional athletes in the world, and I'm proud of people like that.
Thank you, Bill, and we'll be back right after this important message.
This was a very important message. So Bill Watts, the commentator, is leaving. So Ted DiBiase can come in and do commentary over Ted DiBiase's North American title match, which, in case wasn't painfully obvious, and we'll bring it up here in a minute, actually was a pre-taped match from Houston. But yes, this big giant company couldn't afford 3 headsets, or at least kick Boyd off. Because I don't know, listening to, I think Ted and Bill, that would have been a fun, although it would have distracted from the match, obviously. If you had Ted DiBiase and Bill Watts sniping at each other for 6 minutes. But yeah, so Bill's leaving for a segment. And let's go back to the desk where Ted DiBiase has arrived at the scene.
We'll have the North American Heavyweight Championship match between the title holder, Ted DiBiase and the challenge of Tiger Conway Jr. coming up right now. Ted is here at our desk.
Boyd, as you know, I've held the North American heavyweight title longer and more times than anybody in the history of the title. And I'll sit here and tell you this, that I have done more for the North American heavyweight title than any previous holder. I have defended this title all over the United States, all over the North American continent. Recently, I defended the title in Houston, Texas, against one Tiger Conway Jr., who I might add is a very good friend of the Junkyard Dogs. And as you'll see by the videotape replay, I handled myself as a true champion, and everybody will have to agree that I am definitely on top in wrestling.
You're not only top in wrestling, you've taken a North American heavyweight champion to be recognized, and you are recognized, Ted, because in a recent publication from New York, a new magazine that goes all over the world, you are the winner of one category in that poll, but the category is the most hated man in professional wrestling. If you're out to prove people not to like you because of the tactics you use in the ring, you're really doing a good job of it. Right now, let's watch that title match between Ted and Tiger Conway Jr. from Houston, Texas.
All right, so DiBiase says that he's been the longest and the greatest North American champion ever. And he's been a pretty good champion, no doubt here, people. I don't know if he's been the longest, but he's the longest since we've been watching. We'll say that. Now, they did announce that he was recently named the most hated man in wrestling by a quote-unquote magazine in New York. And sure enough, when I looked it up, he is the PWI Year in Review most hated wrestler of the year for 1982. The other top three finalists were Blackjack Mulligan, Superstar Billy Graham, and Buzz Sawyer. So, good company here, folks. Am I right? Good company, good company. So we then go live-ish to Houston, Texas for North American Heavyweight Champion Ted DiBiase versus Tiger Conway Jr. Now, they turned the audio of this match down so Ted could do commentary over it. Basically, if I posted this on YouTube and posted the, video of the match and me just talking over it, it's exactly what it was. Take every, YouTube podcaster, commentary person, and it's exactly what you'd be listening to right now. It's exactly what you'd be watching right now. The match was from October 1st and was actually before DiBiase had quite grown his beard all the way in. And I'll tell you what, Tiger Conway Jr. was incredibly unprofessional in this match. He attacked DiBiase before the bell while the referee was reading the instructions. And then minutes later, they're back in the ring. And again, Tiger Conway Jr. is the baby face. Tiger Conway Jr. back in the ring reaches his hand out for a handshake. Ted DiBiase, the 1982 PWI Most Hated Wrestler of the Year, being the champion and the sportsman that he is, reached out to shake Tiger's hand, and Tiger bitch slapped him. And motherfucker, like Jesus Christ, you're a babyface motherfucker. On commentary, DiBiase puts Tiger over as a great wrestler, and Ted the wrestler takes over with a knee to the gut and running Tiger into the buckles. DiBiase almost put him out with a chin lock, but Tiger began firing up before he ran right into Ted's knee. DiBiase put the chin lock back on, and Tiger's arm dropped 3 times, but apparently that wasn't the finish, so the referee tried dropping it a 4th time, and Tiger began firing up, kind of. Tiger came off the ropes and somehow got taken down by a hair pull. DiBiase missed the middle rope elbow drop and did his actual comeback. And at this point is actually when they turned the audio of this match back up. And so you could hear the fans along with DiBiase's commentary. And Ted somehow blocked a diving, Ted somehow blocked a diving top rope elbow, put a foreign object in his glove, and knocked Conway the fuck out for the win. This match was not smooth. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't bad either. It just wasn't pretty. You will see much prettier looking matches on national television in 2023 and assuredly in 2024. And let me see here. So we're going to play actually the audio of the finish. This is the audio of Ted DiBiase commentating on the finish here, where he pulls the foreign object out, hits Tiger Conway with it, and then I believe it goes back to the desk. So let me go to that right now.
So I'm up in the corner and I'm trying to regain my composure and get myself together. And a lot of people here say that I was putting some foreign object into my glove and loading up to hit him. I was simply catching my breath and trying to get my marbles back together. Boom. He come in, and just like I caught the junkyard dog, I caught him with one clean shot. One shot put him down. He's down for the 3 count, and Ted DiBiase has successfully defended his North American title one more time. His first appearance in Houston, Texas, 4th largest city in the United States, against an opponent who was a local boy, against a crowd who was very definitely against me simply because they are big Junkyard Dog fans, big Tiger Conway fans, and for that very reason they don't like me. And you can see the referee's given me my belt. I am the champion and have defended it successfully once again.
There you viewed the North American Heavyweight title contest between Ted DiBiase and Tiger Conway Jr. We'll be back right after this word from Mid-South Wrestling Television Network.
All right, so I mean, you heard it. There's nothing really else to really discuss about it. You know, one of those things, you know, it is what it is. You know, we went over the finish of the match, and here we are. All right, so we're going to return to the desk here because Bill Watts has returned, and there's another return. In fact, a return of somebody that we've been mentioning that he's been missing for a little while here. Let's go to Bill Watts to talk about the return of General Skandor Akbar.
Well, boy, Pierce, like a bad penny that always turns up, the supreme opportunist. Skandor Akbar has come back on the scene, spending a lot of money that's going to create a lot of problems for a lot of people. Let's listen to an interview pre-taped with Reeser Bowden.
General Skandor Akbar is certainly a man that needs no introduction in the Mid-South area, but it might be pointed out that you have been absent for quite a while now since the one-man gang and Killer Khan. I'm sure that folks are wondering why you're back and who you brought with you.
Of course, Mid-South always seems to magnify all of the General's transactions and the way I conduct myself. Well, here's one that you can really blow out of proportion. I've just leased the services of Kamala, the Ugandan giant, for an astronomical amount of money. And you know, the crowning insult of all of this, as this man was left completely out of the showpiece of the wrestling world, the Superdome on Thanksgiving. But from this day on, this man will be in every extravaganza, spectacular that Mid-South has to offer, or this nation, or this world. And of course, you know, I've been sitting back observing these past few weeks, and you know, it's quite obvious who Stagger Lee is. We all know who it is. And you know, the Ugandan giant Kamala is the only man, I repeat, the only man ever to defeat the Junkyard Dog with no outside interference whatsoever. He's proved that he's unbeatable. And I've sat back all these weeks and I'm picking the biggest plum of them all. Ugandan warrior, Kamala. From here on out, it's going to lead to Kamala and the General. And when you get there, it won't be any picnic.
Well, you know from past experience, when General Skandor Akbar manages a man, things do happen. So watch and see what happens in future weeks right here.
Looks like there's more trouble coming up here in the Mid-South area. Right now we have the match in the ring. Let's go for the introduction. Here's Reeser Bowden.
All right, so Akbar is back. I was just talking about him. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but it was very much, hey, whatever happened to Skandor Akbar? Because unfortunately, it's not as easy to find record of where managers went. Like I can sit here, like I said, I can go to Cage Match and tell you, okay, well, this person only wrestled this person wrestles his last match in Mid-South in December, and then he moves on to Houston. Well, unfortunately, there's not a very good record on managers. And I believe Akbar was floating back and forth between here and Dallas. He may have been in Houston at the time, but I mean, if I was a betting person, he was probably in Dallas. But you know, like I said, it's hard to really keep track of it. And he's been gone. Notice Noter brings up the Mongolian Stomper, who just 2 months ago, I think it was, they said that Akbar paid more money for the Mongolian Stomper than anybody's ever been paid for in wrestling. And Stomper was gone in weeks. So Akbar gets interviewed by Reeser, and he got Kamala for an astronomical amount of money. I'm really starting to think that General Skandor Akbar is just bad with his money. And General Akbar, if you're out there, and actually I'm not sure if he's still with us, I should probably check that here. But General Akbar, if you are still with us and you're out there listening to this, I would like some of your money. I would like to be your charge and become, a wrestler under your tutelage, Mr. Akbar. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you appear to overspend for your wrestlers here. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing. And actually, General Akbar passed away in August of 2010. He lived to be 75. And yeah, but yeah, when I look at his Wikipedia page, it doesn't give any specifics here. It just says he managed in Mid-South and in World Class. So yeah, so there you go. But yeah, so General Akbar's family, if you were listening to this and you are as loose with the purse strings as, the general was, I would not mind being in your service and, being a heel wrestler for you in your attempt to take over a small local territory. Like I can live without Louisiana. If you want to bankroll me to take over a small territory in Massachusetts, go for it. I'm all for it. Let's go. Let's take over Beyond. Let's take over Top Rope. Let's take over Live Pro Wrestling. All the places here in Massachusetts. Let's take those over, shall we? Anyway, back to the actual interview because, what the fuck, right? So Akbar's mad that Kamala was kept out of the Superdome show and promises that will not happen again. We all know who Stagger Lee is, and Kamala is the only man to ever defeat the Junkyard Dog without interference. And so that brings us to our next match. It's quite the battle here. Kamala with his yet unnamed handler and General Skandor Akbar versus El Silencio. Who wears short shorts? Kamala's unnamed handler wears short shorts. And to make it worse, he's wearing khaki-colored shorts, so it looks like he's naked from the waist down. And so we have Kamala versus the Silence here. No idea who El Silencio is. And in an attempt to Google it, it simply brings up a 411 Mania article about a completely fascinating story of a lady wrestler with a similar name who was later revealed to be one of Mexico's most prolific serial killers. So El Silencio has a lot to live up to here. So Silencio turns his back on Kamala for some reason. So Kamala assaults him at the bell. Did that make Kamala the violence behind the silence? Silencio wore a full bodysuit and mask, and not sure if that helped him cushion the blows, but Kamala won in about 20 seconds with 2 splashes to the back, and then Kamala ripped off Silencio's mask and gave it to Akbar. So let's go to that. We're going to play the audio here of Kamala going up to Silencio's mask and talk about it afterwards.
He looks like he's going after El Silencio's mask. The man, Kamala, is going after El Silencio's mask. Ricky Ferrar is telling his man Friday, Kamala has taken his mask. It's almost like he scalped his opponent or he took a coup. Boyd Pierce, and he's handing it to Akbar, and Akbar is coming over here. We'll maybe get to the bottom of this. Kamala is going after Kamala's going after Akbar. He wants that mask back. Something's going on.
This man is elated at what he's got. It's a trophy. We're going to collect those masks just like these Indians used to collect scalps in this area. And you know, there's a certain somebody, Stagger Lee, that stinks in the Mid-South. He's got a mask. Mr. Olympia's got a mask. And guess what? Mr. Wrestling number 2's got a mask. And we're going to get each and every one of them. From now on, all negotiations for this man will be made through the General. Be warned.
Ladies and gentlemen, Skandor Akbar is not invited to the table by me as your host, so we'll go back, and we'll come back with exciting action after this word from Mid-South Wrestling.
Thank you, Boyd. Cutting off your top manager, your top heel manager, because he didn't have permission to come to the desk. He didn't have your permission to go to the desk to cut a promo. So Kamala takes off the mask, and actually, they gave Friday his name here. They called him his guy Friday. And then Friday took it from him, gave it to Akbar. But apparently Kamala really wanted that fucking mask and started going after it. But Friday pulled him away. And anywho, Akbar vowed to take every mask here in Mid-South. He talked about Stagger Lee, Mr. Olympia, Mr. Wrestling 2. And so, I mean, this could be an interesting feud here with Kamala, the Savage. Because, they're counting down the days. There are not that many days left without a Junkyard Dog. And so they only have till the end of 90 days to prove that Stagger Lee is, in fact, the Junkyard Dog. And we'll see how this goes. So we had Mr. Olympia and Iron Mike Sharp in our next match versus Rick Davidson and John Davidson. One of the Davidsons is balding. The other has a full head of hair. They didn't really specify which Davidson was which. And in case you thought this was an important match between two, between an up-and-coming team and a top team, here's Bill Watts to talk about anything that has nothing to do with the match.
Wonder if Ted DiBiase, in his quest for supremacy of Mid-South, didn't have something to do with the negotiations of Akbar coming back on the scene with Kamala, this awesome Ugandan. And especially now, it seems like the mask has become the intent. True, the Ugandan warrior was not on the big Superdome Thanksgiving in New Orleans, but I think there's a little more than meets the eye. I think General Akbar, who is well known as an opportunist, sees a way of milking and bilking something, and certainly Kamala wouldn't know the value of a dollar. Still, Akbar has not revealed who actually owns and controls Kamala, but they've struck some evil bargain, and apparently Kamala is very happy. DiBiase was saying he'd buy him some new beads, a new spear, or a half a cow to eat, whatever he wanted to get the mask off of Stagger Lee. And apparently they found that Kamala, a simple man, when he beats the opponent, he wants a memento. And the mask seems to be the memento. Now you see Big Iron Mike Sharp.
All right. So Watts floats a theory, and it's a good theory. Did DiBiase pay off Kamala, or pay off Akbar to come in and bring in and be the handler, the manager of Kamala, and have Kamala do his dirty work? Because Kamala, like they've said, he's the only person to manhandle Junkyard Dog. I don't know if he's actually beaten Junkyard Dog clean. My instinct says no, but whether or not he has, it's like, I guess at the end of the day, even if he didn't beat him clean, Kamala is big, scary, he's a beast. He's here to kick some ass and take some names, and if anybody can just manhandle Stagger Lee and try to get that mask off, it might just be Kamala here. And Ted DiBiase has apparently agreed to buy Kamala some new beads, a new spear, or even half of a cow if they get Stagger Lee's mask. What the hell would you do with half a cow? And I guess more importantly, what the hell do you do with the other half of the cow? What is Ted DiBiase doing with this cow? I'm afraid to ask. Next week, by the way, Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne are going to wrestle Mr. Olympia and Iron Mike Sharp. That got announced here. Watts gives a shout out to a blind man in the crowd. And then he talks about how he loves when disabled people come to the show. This is not just me riffing. This is what Watts said. Anyway, Olympia then pinned Balding Davidson with a crossbody off the middle rope. Both Davidsons wrestle about half a dozen times here in Mid-South and then retire, so don't get too used to them. Mr. Wrestling 2 versus Marty Lundy. Lundy's head is taped up for some reason, and then it turned out it wasn't actually tape. It was a headband that was stretched so tight across his head that it looked like it was tape. Like his head was busted open and he put tape over the stitches or whatever, so he didn't get busted open on TV. Nope, just the headband. So if you want to see Arn Anderson with a headband, actually, and he doesn't even have the beard, he only has a mustache. So Arn Anderson with a headband and a mustache, this is the show for you, apparently. I don't know, and we've been talking about Mr. Wrestling 2 has been having the story where he's one of his masks has been defaced and dirtied and torn up a bit by some mysterious man. But this week his mask was exceptionally white. Like he brought out the Clorox on his gear this week. Lundy rammed his shoulder into the gut of 2 until 2 nailed him with a tremendous knee lift. He hit a few more moves and then won with another knee lift. Mr. Wrestling 2, champion of the knee lift. Bob Roop versus Mike Bond. So, remember when I said like 3 or 4 months ago, and then 2 or 3 months ago, and then 1 or 2 months ago, and then probably last month, that Bob Roop never wrestles on TV again? Apparently, I was misinformed. Bill explains that wrestlers are independent contractors and can come and go as they please. And that explained why Bob Roop hasn't been around for a little bit and has been able to take vacation. Somebody please tell Daddy Ari about this. Roop is doing commentary next week, and Watts calls Bond a real comer as opposed to an up-and-comer. Roop hits she calls that the rear view, and won with a brainbuster. And yes, he hit she calls that the rear view on Mike Bond. Hiro Matsuda and Yoshiatsu, the Japanese Dream Team, I believe was how they were introduced at the beginning of the show, versus King Cobra and Tim Horner. This is your expiration of time match. There's literally 2 minutes left when the bell rings. So what we're saying is they didn't have a chance to do a match. And they announced that next week there will be girl wrestlers. And Bill says it will be adorable. I'm sure that's what they were going for, was adorable. This match may only be 2 minutes long, but that doesn't mean Bill has to actually talk about the match. And it goes to the time limit to bring our show to a close. So another good episode. It really, helps set the stage for what's coming up in the future. It's set up, it brought back Akbar. It really brought heat onto the feud with Stagger Lee. Even though Stagger Lee wasn't on the show, Ted DiBiase was barely on the show. The rest of the Rat Pack wasn't there, Duggan and Bourne. But you were reminded this is the big angle. And now there's a new twist, a new, knife to dig into this angle. Because now we have Kamala, the Ugandan giant. 6'8", as long as you accept that Reeser is 7 feet tall. 380 pounds. Kamala, the Ugandan giant. Sorry, I was trying to do my impersonation of the videotaped in Jerry Jarrett's backyard at that time. So that does it for Mid-South Wrestling, So next week we're into December. And as we've mentioned already, they've already recorded the Superdome show had already happened. And we're going to talk more about that in the next few weeks, because this show and next week's show is actually taped before the Superdome show. It's taped on Thanksgiving Eve, and it obviously air. Well, the shows were taped before Thanksgiving Eve and obviously air after Thanksgiving Eve. So before we go, it's time for our favorite segment. It's Weird News of the Week. That is, of course, Weird News of the Week presented by Nobody. Nobody, the company that sponsors nothing. And for that, we go to UPI.com. We go to our old friend Ben Hooper for this week's article, Trapped Kittens Rescued from Utah Sewer Line. Firefighters in Utah came to the rescue of two kittens that wandered into a sewer line and became trapped. The Park City Fire District said a crew responded to a 911 call from a concerned citizen and discovered two kittens had entered a sewer line through a broken cap. The crew used a camera truck to locate the kittens in a sewer line and guide them towards a manhole where firefighters lifted them to safety. The kittens were taken to a local animal shelter. And I think we can all say, "Aww, that's so cute." Who doesn't love kids? Who doesn't love cats? Like, if you don't love cats, please stop listening to the show, because, I mean, maybe if you're allergic to cats, I might let you get away with it. But, I mean, even then, come on. Cats are so freaking cute and adorable. If you're ever feeling sad, go look up kitten photos online. Or go ask somebody who owns a cat to send you a video of their cat doing something silly. Like, in addition to having a Buffalo Bills podcast, I might just need a podcast to talk about how cute cats are. And it'll be listened to by 3 billion people, because 3 billion people will all agree that cats are just fucking cute. And so that's going to do it for this week's show. And for that, we got to play our outro music. That's going to come up eventually. And I got to turn it off mute. All right. Thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you again in 7 days. Hello and welcome to the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Re-Watch-Along Project. This is podcasting the way it used to be and the way you like it. This show is a production of the Something Else Podcasting Network, and it is episode number 028 of Smoky Mountain Wrestling from August 8th, 1992, taped July 6th, 1992, at Polk County High School in Benton, Tennessee. My name is Aria, and welcome to the show. So in case it's the first time you've ever listened to this show, what we do is we watch every single episode of Smoky Mountain Wrestling beginning on February 1st, 1992, all the way through episode 200 on November 26th, 1995. And we go 1 week at a time, and we talk about the highs, the lows, the goods, the bads, the in-betweens, and we talk about the greatness that was wrestling, in 1992 in Tennessee. Most weeks we also tell you what else has happened in the world of wrestling, but I actually didn't have time to jot it down this week. And also, to the best of my knowledge, nothing was really happening at the time. So, I mean, sorry. Go read The Observer from this week in 1992 and enjoy. Anywho, so we're still at Polk County High School in Benton, Tennessee, in front of approximately 200 people. This is the fourth of 4 episodes taped. So you're going to see throughout the show, even though, and we talked about it, we talked about how, they kind of did some gimmicks. So they weren't really taping 4 consistent episodes. So they would do a lot of video packages and whatnot to kind of cut down on the fact that they're taping 4 hours of TV. But you can see the crowd is tired for this one. And we'll talk about that here as we go on. Also notable, this show airs the same day as Fire on the Mountain. So obviously no results for Fire on the Mountain during this show because they're still trying to talk into the building here, depending on what day this show aired in your area. Because for some people it aired on Sundays, and for some it aired on Saturdays, depending on your network in the area. We say August 8th just because primarily that was the day that it dropped, So let's go to the intro with Bob Caudle and Dutch Mantell, and they're going to tell you about this week's main event.
Hi, wrestling fans. Welcome to another action-packed, exciting hour of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Wrestling the way it used to be and wrestling the way you like it. I'm Bob Caudle along with Dutch Mantell. Dutch, we got a very special program today. On it, you're going to see a unique type of match, a 4-team elimination match. And those 4 teams, the Fantastics, Danny Davis, Dixie Dy-no-mite, Robert Fuller, and Jimmy Golden, and the Heavenly Bodies. Also, the winning team will receive $5,000. Now, also, we'll see Hector Guerrero in action, examine and take a look at the Killer Kyle Dixie Dy-no-mite situation, and we'll have more. And Dutch, what about this?
Well, the Fantastics and the Heavenly Bodies, they've been wild lately. Throw in 2 more teams, and we got certified chaos today. But today, my special guest on Down and Dirty with Dutch is Bob Armstrong, and I'm going to ask some questions that people want to know.
All right, fans, that and much more during this hour. We're about ready with the action. Right now, let's go to the ring.
All right, so a very special program this week is how it's introduced here. And we have a 4-team elimination match for $5,000 because apparently that's the gimmick when they do a TV show on the same day or right after, a big show. It is for the Volunteer Slam too, where, you couldn't, they taped it beforehand, and instead of inserting, whatever, they instead did that was when they did the Royal Rumble for $5,000. But apparently $5,000, that is the going rate for winning a big match here in Mid-South, even if the show only drew 200 people and only made, around $2,000. We're supposed to believe that, they gave away $5,000. Don't want to call bullshit on this, but anywho, Fantastics, Heavenly Bodies, Jimmy Golden and Robert Fuller, and Danny Davis and Dixie Dy-no-mite are the 4 teams in this match. Heavenly Bodies, of course, the Smoky Mountain Tag Team Champions. This is a non-title match. I should get that out of the way first. Does that give away who wins and who loses? Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Because, the Heavenly Bodies can do a lot of things with $5,000. And so for that, we go... Oh, and by the way, Bullet Bob Armstrong, our commissioner, is going to be on Down and Dirty with Dutch. And Dutch has promised to ask the tough questions, the questions that the fans want to know. And with that, we go to our first match, Hector Guerrero versus Paul Lee. For some reason, and I've watched this, I watched this a dozen times. I'm not kidding when I say I watched this a dozen times. For some reason, Hector hooks up referee Mark Curtis and was going to give him a hip toss for no reason during the match. He goes over to Mark Curtis, and it's like, okay, I'm going to demonstrate a hip toss to you right now. And Mark Curtis had to beg off of it, and Hector eventually let him go. But it's like, Curtis wasn't fighting back or anything. It was more like Hector's like, oh, here, Mark, here's how you do a hip toss. And Mark's like, please don't do that to me here in the middle of this match. So we'll just chalk that up as weird shit. Dutch runs down the rules of the 4-team elimination match, and they get reiterated a lot throughout this show. And it's one of the things you need to, and we'll get into this, but this may have been the first of its kind in the United States at this point, at least on United States television. And like literally, and like I think we talked about it last week, but I'll talk about it again later on. It's like, you know, at this time, you did not see 3 ways, 4 ways, 27 ways. It's like you had 1-on-1, you had 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, and sometimes if you're really special, 5-on-5. And that was it. So, yeah. Hector won quickly with his rolling abdominal stretch, and this is when I note that he does not win much. Sorry, Hector, you don't seem to win a whole lot here. So speaking of our 4-way main event, we do interviews with all 4 teams. Let's go to that right now.
This afternoon, $5,000 for the top teams in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and mixing Dy-no-mite and Nitro. Tell them what happens when that happens.
A big explosion happens. Let me tell you something fantastic. Friends. Let me tell you something, heavenly bodies, not friends. Let me tell you something, Fuller and Golden, not friends. Friend that gets foe, friend that gets friend. $5,000 is going to be Dixie Dy-no-mite and Nitro Danny Davis's night.
Robert, I'm going to tell you one thing. I don't know what goofball for Smoky Mountain Wrestling here booked this kind of match. You got 4 tag teams in the ring at the same time, brother. The Fantastics, the Heavenly Bodies, Dixie Dy-no-mite, and that other geek TNT, whatever he calls his name. And then you got the stud stable here, brother. For $5,000, we can kick a lot of butt.
You just remember how big we are, Jimmy. 6'5", near 300 pounds to both of us. I'm going to guarantee you, if Mama's going to be mad at anybody, it's going to be me for whipping up on all the cablers, because all these boys are about half the size of the Tennessee Stud, and I'm looking very much forward to teaming up with Jimmy Golden, my partner, taking them down.
You know, Jackie, I'm so excited about today's program because we're going to get a chance to be in there with 4 terrific tag teams. You know, Jackie, we'd beat the Heavenly Bodies up for free, but I want to tell Davis, Dixie, Fuller, and Golden one thing. We're coming in that match for $5,000, brother, and the winning team gets it all, and that's what we're going to do today right here on this program.
You know, when you think about the prospect of winning $5,000 in a tag team elimination match, you got to look at who is the best tag team in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Well, you're looking at the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team Champions right here, and you Davis, you Dy-no-mite, you Fuller and Golden, and you Fantastics don't even think about bringing any lead pipes in the ring, and we'll shove it down your throat, because we're going to be not only the champions, but $5,000 richer.
Maybe Stanley can get a better hairpiece with the extra $5,000. But, so Danny Davis, being the nice stand-up gentleman that he is, he was nice enough to sit here and tell us which of the teams that he was friends with and which of the teams he wasn't friends with. Jimmy Golden basically calls whoever booked this match a bunch of goofballs. Fuller pointed out that they are big, and that makes them the favorites. And it's funny because, like, and I know he was a heel in a Southern Territory in the 70s and 80s. He bled. And his forehead really shows off how much that boy bled. Because, he was all pink and bubblegummy in the forehead there, scarred up all to hell. It looked like, the joke always is about John Moxley, if you look at him sideways, he bleeds. And like, I was shocked Fuller wasn't bleeding during this promo. Jackie Fulton, by the way, is wearing an All Japan soccer jersey, which I liked it. I'm not a soccer fan, but I thought it looked pretty cool. Tom Pritchard, and it's funny because they didn't have Jim Cornette even cutting a promo here, but Pritchard did the whole promo for the Heavenly Bodies. He pointed out that they're the Smoky Mountain Tag Team Champions, so that already makes them the best team in Smoky Mountain. And now today, they're all going for that $5,000. We re-air the entire Dixie Dy-no-mite and Killer Kyle angle. First, where Dixie beat Kyle, which was in that match where if Dixie beat Kyle, he got to see what was in the violin case. And it turned out that the only thing in the violin case was a roll of tape that Kyle then taped his fist and kicked his ass. And then they showed last week's angle where Dixie beat the Stormtrooper and got his ass kicked by Kyle again, which included Hector Guerrero running in and braining him with a chair. And of course, all that leads to the tape fist match at Fire on the Mountain with Dixie Dy-no-mite versus Killer Kyle. And so we've had this gimmick once before, and it never gets old. Bob Caudle is going to attempt to interview Killer Kyle.
Dutch, I want to show you something very frustrating. Earlier today, I tried to question Killer Kyle about his feelings concerning Dixie Dy-no-mite. I want you to watch this. Here's what happened. Fans, we've asked Killer Kyle to come out here and speak with us. So far, we haven't gotten any response from him. But, Kyle, I wanted to ask you, what is the basis of this trouble and this problem between you and Dixie Dy-no-mite? Maybe he didn't hear me, fan. What is the basis of the problem between you and Dixie Dy-no-mite? What plans have you got for Dixie Dy-no-mite in this taped fist match? An exercise in frustration, fans, with Killer Kyle. Boy, Dutch, Killer Kyle, he's really a spooky individual, there's no doubt about that. Another rivalry, too, that's raging right now is between Paul Orndorff and Ronnie Garvin. Now, let's take a look at Orndorff in action and then hear some of his thoughts.
Okay, so like I said, this has happened before. Caudle tries to interview Killer Kyle, and Killer Kyle keeps his yap shut. He doesn't say a word. And apparently Bob Caudle, you know, he must think Killer Kyle only speaks Spanish, because instead of trying again in a normal volume, he began screaming at him and asking his question louder, because, you know, that's what people do for people who don't speak English very well. You just yell at them louder. That'll make them understand what you're saying better. Anyway, Caudle asks him again about it. So Kyle ripped up the Confederate flag. You can hear it tearing, and you might have known what it was, but that's what it was. He was ripping up the Confederate flag as his means to show what he intends to do to Dixie Dy-no-mite, which went right over Bob Caudle's head. We went back to the desk, and Caudle segued into talking about Paul Orndorff and Ronnie Garvin. They show Paul Orndorff beating a jobber from a few weeks ago. It was when he won by kneeling down on the jobber's chest for the pin. And this is where it gets ridiculous here. But let's go to the promo here that Paul Orndorff cuts about Ronnie Garvin.
You know, Ronnie Garvin, it seems to me that you got these hillbillies, these rednecks here out here. They worship Ronnie Garvin, the man who beat everybody that ever came around it, wherever it may be. But I'm going to tell you this now, Ronnie Garvin. You've never stepped in a ring with a man like Mr. Wonderful, the man who has it all, the man who power drove Hulk Hogan, the man who power drove Andre the Giant. Ronnie Garvin, you're next.
So, anyone think that he actually pile drove Andre the Giant? Now, obviously, wrestling's a work, and, you know, if Andre wanted him to pile drive him, Andre would have let him pile drive him. However, I don't know. Maybe someone will be like, hey, dumbass, here's video of it. And you know something? I would like to see it. I would like to see the video of Paul Orndorff giving a pile driver to Andre the Giant. It's almost like that video of Kurt Hennig giving the perfect plex to the Big Show in WCW. It's like, even though video of it exists, and even though I've seen it, it's like, it's impossible to believe. So it's very possible that maybe video exists of Paul Orndorff pile driving Andre the Giant. But I imagine even if I saw it, I probably wouldn't believe it actually happened. And so Orndorff talks about all the rednecks that love Ronnie Garvin. He screams about pile driving Hogan and Andre. And they're building up a pile driver match between Orndorff and Ronnie Garvin and Fire on the Mountain. And I'll tell you what, this is where it gets weird. Because it's like, you know, we've spent 6 months talking about how the pile driver's banned and how, you know, Paul Orndorff isn't allowed to use his favorite move. And now we're just going out and saying, okay, now he can use his favorite move. and he's got to do it here against Ronnie Garvin. So we'll see if this is a new thing moving forward here. So I know, honestly, I don't think Ronnie Garvin is here longer than this show, the Fire on the Mountain show. And I know Orndorff, we're closer to the end of Orndorff than we are to the beginning. I'll just say that. He's still here for a little while, but, he's in WCW in the new year. So it really tells you this shit ain't lasting long here, people. But we go to commercial, we come back, and it's time for Down and Dirty with Dutch Mantell. So normally they do these in the ring, or that week where they were talking to Mr. Ron Wright, who, by the way, hasn't been on the show in weeks, which is just a criminal act. Except for that, they've all been in the ring. This wasn't in the ring. It was actually pre-taped. And I think they could have, because, they make a big deal that it's always in the ring in front of the people. I think they should have made a little comment about, hey, look, the commissioner's busy. He can't guarantee time during the actual show. However, he can, tape it beforehand, and talk to Dutch. They didn't really quite go that far, but, it's still a good piece of business here. So let's go to Down and Dirty with Dutch Mantell and his guest, Bullet Bob Armstrong.
I'd like to welcome everybody to Down and Dirty with Dutch. I'm Dutch Mantell, and you're not. But today, my special guest on Down and Dirty with Dutch is none other than the commissioner of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Mr. Bob Armstrong. Mr. Armstrong, I'd like to welcome you on the program today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Dutch. It's nice to be here talking with you, and I understand you have a few questions that you'd like to ask me yourself.
Well, as you know, Mr. Armstrong, I have never disagreed personally with any of your fines or any kind of your momentary damages that you've assessed wrestlers. I agreed with everything you've ever done, and I think Smoky Mountain couldn't have a better commissioner than you, and I've said that many, many times on the program, but a lot of people have written me, and they've said, Dutch, we would like you to ask, since I am the voice of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, they have asked me, they said, Dutch, why don't you ask Mr. Armstrong some questions, and I've compiled some of them today, and I'd like to ask you if you don't mind.
Well, I certainly go right ahead.
In the case of the fining of Paul Orndorff for using the pile driver. Now, you would fine Paul Orndorff to use the pile driver, but why not say primetime Brian Lee for using the cancellation? Now, why Orndorff and not Brian Lee?
Well, the answer is very simple, Dutch. The cancellation is a move that stuns you in order to win a match. When you pile drive a man, he can be injured permanently, and I've seen it happen. I'm not going to allow it in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. We're not going to have that.
Well, let me ask you another question now, since I have your attention here. In the case of the Fantastics and the Heavenly Bodies, you stated, by your own admission, Mr. Armstrong, you stated, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing, no, sir, I wouldn't do that. But you stated by your own admission, you were giving the Fantastics complete leeway in their matches with the Heavenly Bodies. And remember the altercation they had several weeks back, the windshield broken out. Why didn't you do anything to Fantastics about that?
Well, Dutch, if you'd have been listening, you'd know that I did do something. I fined everybody. I did fine the Fantastics $1,500 a piece. I gave them leeway, but I didn't know it would go that far. When it did go that far, everybody paid the price.
So you did fine the
I
Fantastics?
did fine them $1,500 each, as well as Mr. Cornette and his Heavenly Bodies.
Well, my mistake. I didn't know that you had fined them.
Now you know, Dutch.
You did find them.
I did find them.
My last question, in the case of let's go back in time a little bit. Let's go back to the Volunteer Slam, Brian Lee against Paul Orndorff in the finals. You entered the ring, and I'm going to have to say this. Now, this is not me. This is people writing in and asking me that you donned two hats. You not only were the commissioner of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, you were the referee also doing the match. Now, why did you wear two hats? Why did you jump in the ring as a referee at that particular point?
Well, at that particular time, if you'll remember, the referee was flat on his face and knocked out. I was the closest man to the ring. I had the belt in my hand, and I was going to see that the fans in Smoky Mountain Wrestling had a champion that night. And so I assumed the responsibility of the referee, and I gave the belt to Brian Lee. He is the champion, and that's
what I'm saying now. You gave the belt to Brian Lee. That's what started the controversy in the first place.
I gave him the belt because he won the match.
He did win the match.
Is that simple enough? He won the match. He's got the belt.
It's not me. It's not me. It's the fans. I've never disagreed with anything you've ever done, but believe me.
Dutch, the fans write me too. And I want to tell you what Smoky Mountain stands for. We don't have any impersonators like Little Richard impersonators. We don't have wrestlers that go out in bad taste. We like role models here. We like athletes here. We don't charge high prices. We charge regular prices that families can attend. We don't charge $10, $20, or $30 for a pay-per-view. Why am I going to sit in my house and pay $30 to turn on my TV set when I can go down to my local arena and see my favorite stars in person and get their autograph?
I agree with
That's
you.
what Smoky Mountain stands for.
Right.
And that's as long as I am commissioner,
up, you little
it's going to
munchkins.
be that way. So you folks, welcome to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. We're going to go to all the small cities that all the big operations think they're too big for. They're not going to go to those small cities, but we're going to be there. Smoky Mountain's going to be there all the time, and be glad to talk to you and sign your autographs. It's been my pleasure, but not really.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. We'll be back next week down and dirty with Dutch. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll get to that end part here in just a second. But so Dutch, who said that he's going to ask Bob all the tough questions, is being the smarmy, back-talking heel that he is anytime he interviews a babyface. And like we saw when he had Horner a few weeks ago, when Horner ran in on Buddy Landell's Down and Dirty, it's like, oh, hey, my good buddy Tim. It's like, oh, my good buddy Bob. Bob, I've never had a problem with you. I've never, I've never said a cross word about you, Bob. I've always talked you up. I've always said nice things. And I'm just asking questions I hear the fans ask here. And so he calls Bob a great commissioner and said there isn't a better man for the job. That's so nice. So he asks a lot of things that, I'm sure a lot of fans did ask, maybe they did. Well, this, the joke always is the fans in, the Smoky Mountains weren't smart in any sense of the word, and they didn't want to become it either. But, logically, you could ask questions, and, this is what Dutch was asking here. He asked, why is Paul Orndorff getting fined for using the pile driver, and Brian Lee is allowed to use the cancellation? And Bullet Bob, he gives an explanation. He says that the cancellation is it's going to stun you. And the pile driver is a move that's there to legitimately injure you. And I accept that. However, I can also tell you that any move can injure you, and I know we're supposed to think wrestling's a shoot. And yes, being dropped back first over someone's shoulder is not anywhere near what it is for someone to, be dropped on their head in a pile driver. But at the end of the day, any move can injure you. But we'll go with that for now. Dutch brings up that the Fantastics were given all this leeway to do whatever they wanted in their matches with the Heavenly Bodies. And we saw how that turned out. We saw, that giant brawl backstage about a month ago at this point that ended up with everybody, including Cornette, being fined $1,500 each. Dutch, and this is where it starts getting testy. Dutch brings up Bob jumping into the ring as the referee at the end of the Volunteer Slam title tournament. He brings up how, Brian Lee was handed the title. Bob defends it. He says that he was handed the title because he won the match and he is the champion. And if you recall, that was when he beat Paul Orndorff via disqualification. And then Bob kind of goes off on a rant about, modern day wrestling in 1992. He talks about they don't have Little Richard impersonators. They don't charge $30 for pay-per-view. Why would you spend $30 to turn your TV set on? Great question, but still. And then he says they want to have role models. They don't have role models here in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Last week and the week before, we had a wrestler named the Stormtrooper, who, if you didn't listen to either last week, 2 weeks shows, first of all, press pause, go back and listen. But if you didn't listen to either of the last 2 week shows, the Stormtrooper is a man in a black bodysuit with giant swastikas all over it. He is a Nazi. He is that kind of Stormtrooper. And he is the role model that that Bob Armstrong likes to have. He doesn't want Little Richard impersonators. We don't want Johnny B. Bad. We don't want Mark Merrow, on Smoky Mountain Wrestling. We want the fucking Stormtrooper. So just remember, not everything was airtight, brother. We then get our main event. That's right, we're halfway through the show and we're already into the main event. It is a fatal four-way elimination match. Nitro Danny Davis and Dixie Dy-no-mite versus Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden versus the Smoky Mountain Tag Team Champions, the Heavenly Bodies, versus the Fantastics. The rules are, it's a 4-team elimination match where the rules are followed. There were disqualifications, there were countouts allowed, and the key is you could not refuse a tag. If you refuse a tag, you'll be disqualified, and that does close a bit of a loophole, because otherwise, why would you ever tag into the match until you're down to 2 teams? So the match begins with Fuller trying to shake Dixie and Danny's hands, and they wouldn't. What is it with the poor sportsmanship of babyfaces this week? Because coincidence of coincidences, over on Mid-South, which you can listen to on Something Else with Arya and Not KJ, Tiger Conway Jr. reaches out for a handshake with Ted DiBiase, and DiBiase, the heel, reaches out to shake his hand, and Tiger Conway punches him in the fucking face. And you can hear my thoughts on that, the return of General Skandor Akbar, and so much more on this week's episode of Something Else with Arya and Not KJ. So they really exacerbate the loophole here about not being able to refuse a tag when Danny Davis tagged out to Tom Pritchard when Davis and Jimmy Golden ran the corner. Bobby Fulton tagged in and hit a spinning heel kick on Pritchard, which may actually have been the first time we saw that in America too, because, Owen Hart was in the WWF, but, he was an opening match enhancement talent at best. And they're telling the story of the 2 heel teams working together. In a lot of ways, it was like an 8-man tag in some ways. Golden went to the Heavenly Bodies corner for a tag, but neither wanted to tag in. So the story was Golden told the referee that no, he wasn't really trying to tag them, and instead went over to his corner and tagged in Fuller. Finally, Stan Lane was forced into the ring with Jackie Fulton, but Jackie ran over and tagged Bobby. And so they then tried telling you, Stan ran over and tagged in Bobby. So you had Jackie Fulton and Bobby Fulton. And they tried saying that you have to attempt to wrestle first before tagging out, which doesn't make sense since Stan Lane was just in the ring and didn't try to wrestle. Anyway, they ran some simple spots you see in first day of every wrestling school. The Fantastics then take out the both Heavenly Bodies. So Pritchard and Lane locked up and exchanged some headlocks before both tagged out. So all 4 heels got the heat on Bobby Fulton. As I said before, the 2 teams were working together. Jackie tried getting into the ring, but that distracted the referee. So all 4 heels beat on Bobby in the corner. Bobby got a sunset flip on Stan, but Jim Cornette jumped up on the apron and distracted the referee. And so Pritchard broke that up. Bobby made the hot tag, and Jackie ran wild on all 4 men. But then Pritchard loaded his boot, hit an enziguri on Jackie for the pin. So the Fultons have been eliminated. The first team eliminated are the Fultons. And then immediately, Bobby's outside the ring. He gets Jim Cornette's tennis racket and cracks Dr. Tom with it. And he got pinned by Danny Davis. So the Heavenly Bodies are out. The Smoky Mountain Tag Team Champions have been eliminated from this fatal 4-way elimination tag team match. So we're down to 2 teams. It is Nitro Danny Davis and Dixie Dy-no-mite versus Jimmy Golden and Robert Fuller. They go to commercial break, and somehow during the commercial break, Danny Davis got busted wide open. So if this were me, I if I were one of the heels, I would tag out to Dixie and force the baby faces to wrestle each other. However, that all got kind of ignored at this point because, who knows? So the story of this was Dixie did not tag into the match for the longest time, and I think at this point he had 2 or 3 matches already on the taping, in addition to the angle with Killer Kyle the last couple of weeks. Golden dug his nails into Danny Davis's open head wound. Davis was doing a great job as the babyface in peril, getting his ass kicked by his much larger foes. Davis was finally able to stun Fuller long enough to dive into the corner for the hot tag. Dixie slapped the sleeper on Golden and Fuller. Dixie slapped the sleeper on Golden, and Fuller went around the outside of the ring and hit Davis with a chair behind the referee's back. So it's now a 2-on-1 on Dixie. Dixie ducks a clothesline and hits the Confederate kick on Golden, but Fuller breaks it up. We get a double team on Dixie that Mark Curtis didn't even try to break up. And that's when we get the finish, where after all this, after about 20 minutes, Robert Gibson ran in with a cowboy boot and assaulted Golden and Fuller for the disqualification. So Golden and Fuller win the match by disqualification. The fans died for that. So we go to commercial, we come back, and the show's going to end with a promo with Fuller and Golden. Let's go to that.
Get any wilder than that. And the winners are the $5,000, Jimmy Golden, Robert Fuller, but you had some help.
See that fool come up there and hit me in the head with that cowboy boot? He's got a knot on my head as big as a goose egg. Robert Gibson, I'm going to tell you something, boy. I can take a licking and keep on ticking, brother. We got the $5,000 here, brother. We won a lot of things in our lifetime, and this ain't all of it. We gonna win us some more because we the best tag team in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. We gonna win them tag team belts. We gonna win us some more money, and Robert Gibson and I'm gonna win me some more. You'll hide, boy.
You know, I'm not just another pretty face come out here and just yabber, talk and talk. I'm not a talker, I'm a doer. And I'm gonna tell you something, a picture's better than 1,000 words. And there's your picture right there. That's $5,000 that says that Jimmy Golden and Robert Fuller are the very best tag team in the world, much less Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I'm gonna tell you something, Gibson, you go get your old partner back there, baby. You go on and get him. You see how much good that little old munchin's gonna do you, son, because you standing up against right now what was the stud stable and is now reunited. And that is the worst news you boys ever had. Get you some flyers, get your ambulance at the back door, because somebody's going to the hospital.
And there you have it, Jimmy Golden, Robert Fuller. Next week, highlights from Fire on the Mountain and the return of Rock and Roll Express. We'll see you then.
Oh, right. So that does it for the promo. And I mean, it was basic, but it continued to build up. The Rock and Roll Express are returning at Fire on the Mountain. So if you are in the Knoxville area and it's August 8th, 1992, go get your ticket to finally see the Rock and Roll Express reunite. I think for the first time since like 1990 at this point. So it's been almost 2 years because Gibson got injured and then Morton turned heel. So, it makes sense, and we'll see how well it draws. We'll see how well it does with Gibson and Morton back together. Now, notably on this show, we had no Primetime Brian Lee, the Smoky Mountain champion. We had no Dirty White Boy, the #1 contender. We had no Tim Horner, no Buddy Landell. 4 men who, are in some of the biggest matches on the show. Ronnie Garvin, never cut a second promo, or at least a third promo, because he cut the original one for the tag match and the one backstage in Knoxville. So it's like literally for a go-home show. I mean, I guess last week's more of a go-home show than this one was, but for a show that's the big final push for the big show, this could have gone better, I'll say. But that's going to do it for this week's Smoky Mountain Wrestling. 28 down, 172 to go. And I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you again next week.